She married a man who slept beside her every night, but loved someone else in secret. She wasn't cheated on by a stranger. She was used as a disguise, a cover story, a lie dressed up as love. This is not just a story about betrayal. It's about what happens when a woman realizes she was never chosen and finally chooses herself. Thank you for returning back to my channel. Subscribe, like, and comment your city. Charlotte used to believe that love was something you grew into, not something that always arrived with fireworks. When she married Daniel, she told herself that the quiet between them was maturity, that the absence of grand gestures was stability. Love, she believed, did not always need to shout. Sometimes it whispered. 2 years later, those whispers had become silence. Their apartment was beautiful in a cold, carefully curated way. White walls, gray furniture, and framed photographs that looked more like decorations than memories. Every evening followed the same routine. Daniel came home from work, loosened his tie, asked how her day was without really waiting for the answer, and disappeared into his phone or laptop. Charlotte cooked, they ate, and the clinking of cutlery against plates was often the loudest sound in the room. She had tried, especially in the first year. She planned date nights, cooked his favorite meals, wore dresses he once complimented, and asked questions about his dreams and fears. Daniel responded politely, sometimes affectionately, but always distantly, as though his heart lived somewhere else and only his body had come home. At night, he lay beside her like a stranger borrowing space. He rarely touched her. And when he did, it felt obligatory, mechanical. Charlotte stared at the ceiling many nights, wondering how two people could share a bed, and yet feel so alone. Maybe this is just marriage, she whispered to herself more than once. Maybe passion fades. Maybe this is normal. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. The first crack appeared on an ordinary afternoon. Charlotte had returned early from the grocery store because she forgot her wallet. As she stepped into the apartment, she heard Daniel's voice from the bedroom. He was on the phone, his tone low, soft, almost tender. It was a voice she rarely heard directed at her. "I miss you too," he said. Charlotte froze. She stood still, grocery bag slipping from her hand, oranges rolling across the floor unnoticed. Her heart pounded as she strained to hear more. But the bedroom door closed, muffling his words. When Daniel emerged minutes later, he looked startled to see her. "You're back early," he said too quickly. "I forgot my wallet," she replied, forcing a smile. Daniel nodded, avoiding her eyes. "Oh, okay." That night, Charlotte lay awake, replaying his voice in her mind. "I miss you too." Who was he talking to? A colleague? A friend? She wanted to ask, but fear held her tongue. Fear of confirming what her heart had already begun to suspect. The second crack came weeks later. Daniel had fallen asleep on the couch with his phone still in his hand. Charlotte noticed the screen light up with a message notification. She told herself not to look. She told herself that trust was the foundation of marriage. But trust had already been eroding for months. She picked up the phone, hands trembling. The message preview showed a name that made her stomach drop. Emily. "I wish things were different," the message read. Emily was Daniel's stepsister. Charlotte felt the room tilt. Emily had always been a quiet presence in their lives. She attended family gatherings, smiled politely, and rarely spoke much. Charlotte had never suspected anything. Why would she? The word stepsister carried an unspoken boundary, a line that shouldn't be crossed. Her fingers shook as she unlocked the phone. There were hundreds of messages, late-night conversations, shared jokes, confessions, words of longing, words of love. Charlotte sat down slowly, as if her legs could no longer hold her weight. Her chest burned, her throat tightened, and yet no tears came. She scrolled through messages that painted a picture of a man she thought she knew, but clearly did not. "I can't keep pretending," Daniel had written in one message. "I hate hurting her," he wrote in another. "But I love you." Charlotte finally understood. She was not his wife in truth. She was his shield, his disguise, his excuse to appear normal, respectable, acceptable to a family and a world that would never understand what he felt for Emily. His love was not cold by nature. It was simply never meant for her. When Daniel woke up, he found Charlotte sitting across from him, his phone on the table between them. Her face was calm, frighteningly so. "Who is Emily to you?" she asked quietly. Daniel's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Silence stretched between them like a rope pulled too tight. "I know," Charlotte said. "All of it." He sank into the couch, burying his face in his hands. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he muttered. "It just did." "Did you ever love me?" Charlotte asked. Daniel looked up at her, eyes filled with conflict and shame. He hesitated, and in that hesitation she got her answer. "I cared about you," he said finally. "I still do." She nodded slowly. "But you were never in love with me." "No," he whispered. The truth hurt more than any lie he could have told. Charlotte did not scream. She did not throw things or collapse dramatically. Instead, she felt a strange clarity settle over her, like the calm that comes after a storm has already destroyed everything. "I won't be your cover anymore," she said. "I deserve more than this." Daniel reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Please," he said. "I never wanted to hurt you." "And yet you did," she replied. "Every single day." That evening, Charlotte packed a suitcase. She moved methodically, folding clothes, placing memories into boxes, leaving behind a life she once dreamed would last forever. Daniel watched her in silence, regret etched into every line of his face. Before she left, she did something that surprised even herself. She went to see Emily. Emily lived in a small apartment across town. When she opened the door and saw Charlotte standing there, her face went pale. "I know," Charlotte said before Emily could speak. "You don't have to explain." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I never wanted this. I tried to stop him." "Maybe," Charlotte said gently, "but it doesn't change the truth." They sat across from each other in uncomfortable silence. Emily looked broken, ashamed and deeply in love. Charlotte realized then that Emily too was trapped in a situation that could never truly end well. "He chose me because it was easy," Charlotte continued, "but he loves you, and that's something he needs to face honestly." Emily nodded, crying openly now. "I'm so sorry." Charlotte stood up. "I hope one day you both find the courage to live truthfully. But it won't be at my expense." When Charlotte walked out, she felt lighter, even as tears finally spilled down her cheeks. The months that followed were the hardest of her life. She moved into a small apartment, started therapy, and learned how to sit with her pain instead of running from it. There were nights she cried herself to sleep, mourning not just Daniel, but the future she thought she would have. Yet slowly, something began to change. She rediscovered parts of herself she had buried to keep her marriage alive. She laughed again. She made friends. She traveled. She learned that love should not feel like begging someone to see your worth. Meanwhile, Daniel's world fell apart. Emily eventually pulled away, unable to live in the shadows anymore. His family found out the truth, and the disappointment was unbearable. Alone in the apartment Charlotte once filled with warmth, Daniel finally understood the cost of his cowardice. He had lost the woman who loved him honestly. 1 year later, Daniel reached out. "I regret everything," his message read. "I should have chosen truth sooner. I should have been braver." Charlotte read the message without anger, without longing, just acceptance. "I hope you find peace," she replied, "but I already have." She closed her phone and looked out the window, sunlight warming her face. Her life was not perfect, but it was real, and for the first time in a long time, she knew she was no longer living a lie. Because love, she had learned, should never make you feel invisible. Charlotte thought that replying to Daniel's message would be the end of that chapter. She truly believed that closure was a single moment, a firm decision, a clean cut. What she didn't know then was that healing often comes in waves, and sometimes the past returns not to reopen wounds, but to test how strong you have become. Weeks passed after that message. Life settled into a gentle rhythm. Charlotte woke early, jogged through the quiet streets, and drank her coffee by the window before work. Her apartment was small, but it felt alive. Plants lined the windowsill, books lay open on the couch, and laughter came easily when friends visited. It was a space that reflected who she was becoming, not who she had tried to be for someone else. Yet, on some nights, memories still surfaced, not of Daniel's betrayal, but of the woman she had been while loving him, the one who waited, the one who hoped, the one who blamed herself for another person's emotional absence. One evening, as rain tapped softly against her window, Charlotte received an unexpected call. It was Emily. Charlotte stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. Her heart did not race the way it once might have. Instead, there was a quiet curiosity, mixed with caution. "Hello," Charlotte said. "Hi, it's Emily," came the hesitant voice on the other end. "I wasn't sure if you'd answer." "I'm listening," Charlotte replied calmly. There was a pause, then a shaky breath. "I just wanted to say, you were right. About everything." Charlotte leaned back against the couch, eyes closing briefly. "He couldn't choose," Emily continued. "Not really. He wanted love without consequences, truth without accountability. I realized I was just another hiding place." Charlotte felt no satisfaction in those words, only a deep understanding. "I'm sorry," she said softly, and she meant it. "I'm leaving," Emily added. "I got a job offer in another city, a fresh start." "That sounds like a brave choice," Charlotte said. "It's terrifying," Emily admitted, then laughed weakly. "But I think it's necessary." When the call ended, Charlotte sat in silence, listening to the rain. For the first time, she felt compassion for Emily, without resentment attached to it. They had both been casualties of the same lie, trapped in different corners of it. Daniel reached out again months later, this time asking to meet. "I just want to apologize properly," he wrote, "in person." Charlotte considered it carefully, not because she owed him anything, but because she trusted herself now. She knew she could walk away at any moment. They met at a quiet cafe downtown. Daniel looked different, thinner, older. His confidence, once so effortless, had faded into something more fragile. "Thank you for coming," he said, standing awkwardly as she approached. She nodded and sat across from him. "You wanted to talk?" "Yes," he said quickly. "I owe you more than a message, owe you honesty." She watched him closely as he spoke, noticing how nervous he seemed, how often his hands shook. "I was a coward," Daniel said. "I used you to hide from myself, from my family, from the truth. And you didn't deserve that." "No, I didn't," Charlotte replied, not harshly, just factually. "I think about you a lot," he continued, "about how patient you were, How kind. You loved me better than I loved myself." Charlotte took a slow breath. "Love shouldn't require self-erasure, Daniel. That's something I learned the hard way." He nodded, eyes wet. "I know now. And I know I lost something irreplaceable." There it was, the regret, the realization that often comes too late. "I forgive you," Charlotte said after a moment. "Not because what you did was okay, but because I refuse to carry the weight of it anymore." Daniel looked stunned. "You do?" "Yes," she said, "but forgiveness doesn't mean access. It doesn't mean a second chance." "I understand," he whispered. When Charlotte stood to leave, Daniel asked one final question. "Are you happy?" She smiled, genuinely this time. "I am becoming happy, and that matters more." As she walked away, she felt no urge to look back. Months later, Charlotte met someone new. Not in a dramatic, movie-like way, but quietly, naturally. His name was Michael. He listened when she spoke. He asked questions and waited for answers. He showed up consistently, not just when it was convenient. Their connection did not rush. Charlotte took her time, honest about her past, clear about her boundaries. Michael did not try to fix her or rush her healing. He respected it. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, Michael said, "You know, love shouldn't feel like confusion all the time." Charlotte smiled softly. "I know that now." For the first time, love felt safe. Not perfect, but sincere. Not loud, but present. Sometimes Charlotte thought about the woman she used to be, the one who mistook silence for peace and distance for maturity. She wished she could reach back through time and tell her that love should not make you doubt your worth. But perhaps she didn't need to. Her story had become her lesson. His love was a lie, yes, but walking away from it taught her the truth, that real love does not hide, does not use, does not make you invisible. And the greatest act of love she would ever give was choosing herself. Charlotte did not fall in love with Michael all at once. It happened slowly, in quiet moments that did not announce themselves as important until much later. It happened in the way he remembered small details, like how she took her tea or how she went silent when overwhelmed. It happened in the way he never made her feel like she was asking for too much when she asked for reassurance. Still, fear lingered. Love, for Charlotte, had become something fragile. Not because she was weak, but because she now understood how deeply it could wound when built on dishonesty. Some nights, she woke from dreams where she was back in that old apartment, staring at the ceiling beside a man who loved someone else. Michael would notice the tension in her eyes the next morning, and instead of demanding explanations, he would simply ask, "Do you want to talk or do you want space?" That question alone healed something in her. One evening, nearly a year after her divorce was finalized, Charlotte decided to tell Michael everything. Not the polished version, not the summarized version, but the truth in its raw form. They sat on her couch, the city lights glowing faintly through the window. "I was married," she began, "but I was never truly chosen." Michael listened without interrupting. She spoke about the silence, the emotional distance, the phone calls she overheard, and the messages that shattered her reality. She spoke about being a cover, a placeholder, a convenient lie. When she finished, her hands trembled slightly. Michael reached for her gently. "That wasn't love," he said softly. "That was survival." Tears welled in her eyes. "Sometimes I wonder how I stayed so long." "Because you were loyal," he replied, "and because you believed people when they said they cared." Charlotte realized then that her past did not make her foolish. It made her human. Meanwhile, Daniel's life continued to unravel in quieter, lonelier ways. after Emily left the city. The emptiness became unbearable. The apartment felt hollow, stripped of warmth. Family gatherings were tense. Conversations stopped when he entered rooms. His parents no longer looked at him the same way. He had become a living reminder of disappointment and broken values. At night, regret kept him awake. He replayed moments with Charlotte that he once dismissed as insignificant. The meals she cooked with care, the way she waited for him to open up, the patience she extended even when he gave her nothing in return. He realized too late that love does not always arrive with intensity. Sometimes it arrives quietly, asking only to be nurtured. And he had neglected it. Daniel tried therapy, not to win Charlotte back, but because the weight of his choices had become too heavy to carry alone. For the first time, he confronted the truth. He had used lies as shelter, and in doing so, he destroyed everything that could have saved him. "I thought choosing honesty would destroy me," he admitted to his therapist, but hiding destroyed everything instead. Charlotte, on the other hand, was rebuilding. Her confidence returned in ways she didn't expect. She spoke more freely at work, pursued opportunities she once hesitated to take, and began mentoring younger women who reminded her of her former self. She never told them what to do. She simply told them what she learned. "Love should not feel like constant confusion," she would say. "And silence is not the same as peace." One afternoon, Charlotte received an email from a woman she didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Thank you for leaving." Curious, she opened it. The woman explained that she had been in a relationship where she felt invisible, constantly doubting her worth. Hearing Charlotte's story shared anonymously through a mutual connection had given her the courage to walk away. "I realized I was loving someone who needed me to disappear," the woman wrote. "Your story reminded me that I deserve to be chosen." Charlotte sat quietly after reading the email, a lump forming in her throat. She never imagined her pain could become someone else's freedom. That night she wrote in her journal, "Sometimes leaving is the bravest form of love." As her relationship with Michael deepened, Charlotte remained intentional. She spoke up when something felt off. She asked questions. She expressed needs without apology. And each time Michael met her with openness, not defensiveness. One evening, as they walked hand in hand, Michael stopped suddenly. "I need to tell you something," he said. Charlotte's chest tightened instinctively, a familiar fear rising. She nodded. "Okay. I've been offered a job in another state," he said, "but I won't accept it without talking to you first. I don't want to build a future that doesn't consider you." The words stunned her. No one had ever done that before. She realized then that real love does not ask you to shrink. It asks you to stand beside someone who sees you fully. They talked for hours that night, weighing options, fears, and hopes. There was no manipulation, no pressure, just honesty. Whatever they decided, Charlotte knew one thing for certain. She would never again sacrifice her truth to make someone else comfortable. Years later, Charlotte would look back on her marriage not with bitterness, but with understanding. It had taught her what love was not. It had taught her the danger of settling for half-truths and emotional crumbs. His love had been a lie, but the truth she gained from walking away changed her life forever. She learned that love should feel like safety, not anxiety, choice, not obligation, presence, not performance. And most importantly, she learned that choosing yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. Because the moment she stopped being someone's cover story, she finally became the author of her own life. Time moved forward, quietly but persistently, as it always does. Charlotte learned that healing was not a straight line. Some days she felt invincible, grounded in her growth and clarity. Other days, a familiar song, a certain street, or even the smell of a meal Daniel once loved would pull her back into memories she thought she had outgrown. But the difference now was that those memories no longer defined her. They visited, lingered briefly, and then left. She allowed herself to feel without judgment. Michael noticed the change in her over time. Not just the confidence, but the softness that returned once fear loosened its grip. She laughed more freely, trusted her instincts, and no longer apologized for needing reassurance or space. Their relationship grew stronger, not because it was flawless, but because it was honest. One evening, while preparing dinner together, Michael paused and looked at her thoughtfully. "You know," he said, "you don't flinch anymore." Charlotte smiled faintly. "From what?" "From affection," he replied. "From consistency." She considered his words and realized he was right. There was a time when kindness felt suspicious, when stability felt like a trick. Now it simply felt normal. That realization alone felt like a victory. At work, Charlotte was offered a leadership role she never imagined herself taking. Years ago, she would have hesitated, doubting her abilities, questioning whether she deserved to be seen. But the woman she had become did not shrink from opportunity. During her first team meeting, she spoke confidently, her voice steady. As she looked around the room, she saw respect reflected back at her, not because she demanded it, but because she believed in herself. Later that night, she wrote again in her journal, "I am no longer waiting to be chosen. I choose myself daily." Daniel, meanwhile, continued his own painful transformation. Therapy forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about entitlement, fear, and avoidance. He began to understand that love was not something you took while giving little in return. It was not something you hid behind. For the first time in his life, he sat with loneliness without trying to escape it. He tried dating again, but it never worked. Every shallow connection reminded him of the depth he once dismissed. He saw Charlotte everywhere in quiet strength, in honest conversations, in women who knew their worth and refused to settle. One night, while sorting through old boxes, he found a photo from their early days. Charlotte was smiling brightly, eyes full of hope. His chest tightened. "I failed her," he whispered to the empty room, and for once he didn't try to justify it. Charlotte and Emily never spoke again, but Charlotte heard through mutual connections that Emily had moved on, building a life far away, untangling herself from shame and secrecy. Charlotte wished her well silently. Holding on to resentment no longer served her. Years passed. Charlotte and Michael moved in together, not out of pressure or expectation, but out of mutual desire. Their home was warm, filled with laughter, disagreements handled with respect, and love expressed openly. Charlotte no longer feared the quiet because it was no longer empty. One afternoon, Michael proposed not with grand theatrics, but with sincerity. "I don't want to complete you," he said, voice steady. "I want to walk with you, every truth, every season." Tears streamed down Charlotte's face as she said yes. Their engagement was met with joy, not confusion. Celebration, not secrecy. For the first time, Charlotte experienced love that did not require explanation or defense. On the morning of her wedding day, Charlotte stood alone for a moment, looking at her reflection. She thought of the woman she used to be, the one who stayed silent to keep peace, who accepted less because she feared loneliness. "I made it," she whispered softly, not because she was getting married again, but because she had healed. As she walked down the aisle, she felt no doubt, no fear of being invisible. Michael's eyes never left hers. There were no lies between them. No hidden conversations. No shadows. Only truth. Much later that evening, as music played and laughter filled the room, Charlotte stepped outside for fresh air. The night was calm, peaceful. She thought about how pain once convinced her that she was unlovable, replaceable, expendable, and how wrong that belief had been. Pain had not broken her. It had refined her. Somewhere, Daniel scrolled through social media and saw a photo from the wedding. Charlotte looked radiant, alive, loved. He closed the app quietly, a mixture of regret and acceptance settling in his chest. He finally understood. You do not lose people because you are honest. You lose them because you are not. Charlotte's story was no longer about betrayal. It was about awakening. About the moment a woman realizes that love should never cost her dignity. His love was a lie, but her truth became her freedom.